I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grant Holly. I'm the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. We are very happy to be able to partner with UW Extension to bring you the research needed to be able to navigate our ever-changing environment. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for their valuable time and leadership, the growers for joining us, and Allison for being the catalyst from which all of these sessions rely. Thank you so much.
So welcome to the December edition of the virtual brown bag. These are put on by the Growers Association, Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association, as well as UW-Madison Division of Extension. We are having this, usually our November, December editions are nationwide roundup, and we talk about research throughout the US and Canadian growing territories. But this particular session, we had direct requests at the research roundtable talking about in 2023-2024's winter in Wisconsin was not as icy as Wisconsin growers are accustomed to. And so the discussion went to how do we most beneficially manage our sanding needs, our canopy care needs in a world with unpredictable ice or even no ice. And of course, the realization was made that lots of our neighbors in Washington State, Oregon, Massachusetts, New Jersey deal with these conditions all the time. So why wouldn't we have a quick discussion, roundtable, hear the direct personal experiences of people who are in this situation more often than not? So with a couple of housekeeping pointers, go ahead and mute yourself unless you're asking a question. If you would like to ask a question, options are to unmute yourself and ask, or to use the chat window and type it in. If you want to have an anonymous question, the little drop-down box where you say to, you can say to Allison Jonjak, and I'll ask the question on your behalf anonymously. If you enjoy having transcripts or closed captions, the ... more button lets you turn on closed captioning, and I believe that is our that's the quick housekeeping. We'll have today a quick welcome from Grant, who is the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. And then we will go through basically in opposite the sun travel pattern and have Tucker Glenn from Jubilee Farms in Washington State give us his direct experiences with sanding. Then John Mason. Here. And then John Mason of 80 Makepeace out in Massachusetts, and then Mike Haines of Pine Island Cranberry Company in New Jersey. And we're extremely grateful to all of our panelists for being willing to share their experiences, the experience of their neighbors, what has worked, what hasn't worked. I think with all that intro, I'll give Grant Holly, if you want to unmute yourself and give a quick welcome.
Didn't have to do a welcome. I'm interested in the topic myself. I do want to thank everybody, though, for showing up. And I love the fact that our speakers are coming from all over the country, and we have a bunch of our Wisconsin folks here as well. I think it sets the right tone as we look towards the end of this year and sort of start the new year. I know we're talking about sanding, we're talking about farm-specific stuff today, but as we all know, there are a few things on the horizon nationally and internationally next year that all of our associations are going to pay attention to. And one of the pieces that I really like about it is all my counterparts, and it doesn't matter if they're in Mass, if they're in New Jersey, Washington, Oregon, even Quebec, but we're all sort of together with how we're going to try to be able to approach it. And just like you guys are doing today, we're going to do it together, which is going to be able to share one voice across the country, which is the absolute strongest way to be able to support agriculture. Short of that, welcome. I welcome everybody. If you'd like to be able to come out to our Cranberry School, January 15th and 16th. Yes, this is a shameless commercial, and I'm okay with that. Come on down. If you haven't seen the agenda, it looks really good. There's a bunch of stuff for researchers, a bunch of stuff for straight for the farm. We're going to hit on some of the business aspects of cranberry farming as well. A little bit of something for everybody, and can't forget the trade show. With all of that, I'm going to kick it back over to Allison and just say thanks again, you guys.
Yeah, again, a huge thank you to Tucker and to John and to Mike. I'm going to quickly, as we were preparing the call, just show a little bit of the video that the Growers Association made um, a couple years back, highlighting the winter sanding at the Cranberry at the research station. So I'm just going to hit play real quick here so our eastern and western growers can see. I don't want to draw on anything. I just want to hit play. Um, can see what our normal is. And so here's the ice. The flood has been raised. Ice is drawn out. Here's some fancy drone footage, but this is the dump truck of the station manager being able to mine sand on site and run it through a screen, have that truck drive right on the bed. So that's what Wisconsin normal looks like, at least as of 2022. So looking forward to giving you guys that. Here's what ours looked like as you're about to show us what things look like in your world. I'm going to jump back then to the um, PowerPoint. And Tucker, if you want to introduce yourself, we'll dive right into your slides. And
All right, sounds good. Tucker Glenn with Jubilee Farms out in Long Beach, Washington. Thank you for having us. Like I told Allison, I mean, I feel pretty privileged to get to talk to Wisconsin growers. We get, everybody here kind of looks to you guys as the industry leaders or some of the industry leaders of what we try to shoot for here. But yeah, anyways, and envy your guys' sanding operation. There with the ice and the dump truck. I mean, yeah, that would really be nice. But on our end, we use a barge sanding deal with a conveyor that fills up the hopper on the barge. It's probably a couple yard hopper, 2 to 3 yard deal. And we're roughly going about 3/4 of an inch, give or take, about 70 yards to an acre. The sand is, I mean, in a rough ballpark deal of what we haul in. And sand wise, we get our sand from the beach usually. We live right on the coast, but then also the peninsula is kind of sand, pretty much anywhere down. If you dig down any of the ponds, we can mine it out that way as well. But yeah, we'll go with the picture of the barge there going. It just goes along. And sorry, I didn't have any, thought I had some more newer, better pictures, but at least give you a little bit of an idea. But we'll flood the field more with more water than what we'd use at harvest, just so the paddles on the side of the barge don't get in the vines. And then have the conveyor set up. Ideally, if depending on the field, if the conveyor can get set up in the middle, it will cut down on the travel time going from one end of the field to the other. But yeah, then we just kind of go round and round and till we get done, covering all what we need to do.
and so just for the most basic questions, you have I'm showing right now the conveyor setup
Mm-hmm.
at the side of the bed. You'll bring that ferry back and fill it up at the conveyor belt. Do you move that conveyor? Yeah, you must move that conveyor for each bed. Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then tell us a little bit what's your year if you're putting out 3/4 of an inch as your goal, how frequently in terms of how many years go by between sanding an individual bed?
Ideally, we'd be in that 5 to 10 year range. That isn't, we haven't necessarily hit that, or been very consistent. We've actually been a few years since we've sanded between COVID deals and some crew not, leaving or, not having the right people. It's kind of one of those things. It's like, I really want to do it, really, feel it's a real good thing to do, but sometimes other things just take the importance of it. But in an ideal situation, I'd say every 5 to 10 years. But you guys were talking about canopy management, and I know talking with some Wisconsin growers in the past of how you guys can really sand and kind of manage that canopy that way. In our area, at least from my experience, that hasn't necessarily been the case. If we got some vine canopy that's getting a little bit more viney, in that it doesn't necessarily kind of suppress that or kind of get into that, we will generally prune. Pruning's a normal practice in our area. There's also on the sanding front, which some of our neighbors do, which I haven't really done a whole lot lately. Some of them will barge sand out there, or not barge sand, excuse me, dredge sand. They'll pipe it out there and have a couple of guys on the end of some dredge line and kind of moving that around in the field. And that's very labor intensive, hard on the vines, and that. But what I really like about the barge part about it and with the water is, the sand's going through the water, it kind of gets it down evenly. And then as we drain the water out, if it drains slow, it kind of will settle all the way through that top vine mat. So you don't get like a gap between, where the sand lays on the new vines, to get down to the ground. It'll generally kind of with the water get itself all the way down there. So we're happy with it on that end.
Fantastic. Grant, I think I'm going to leave the sand content question until after all three have presented, and that way everyone can give their answer to it at the end. But I do appreciate questions coming in, so everyone feel free to bring in questions as we come. I guess as we go through this, Mike or John, any questions for Tucker? Otherwise, maybe we'll move into John's, and then we'll move into Mike's, and then we'll move into the open question season.
Oh, very familiar with those pictures of Tucker's.
All right.
My only question, Tucker, did you say how much you guys are shooting for, like a 1/2 inch, or I guess you said 3/4 of an inch, right?
Yeah, in a perfect, but it doesn't necessarily work out perfectly each time, but it's ranging that 1/2 to 1 inch, depending on how much you overlap, and there is some adjustment with the calibration on there, and that.
All right. I will stop sharing those photos, and then John, if you want to bring your slides up.
Move on. Yeah.
So moving from the far west, skipping over central and heading into the east coast. Here is our picture. Yes, we see perfectly.
So, yeah, hello to everybody. Thanks for having me. I'm John Mason, manager here at the 80 Makepeace company. Also own a small 9-acre farm of my own that's been in the family. I've been growing up doing this my whole life, and hope to continue. I grew up ice sanding with small buggies, and that was the only way we sanded. And we generally had ice every year, and we could pick and choose what bogs we wanted to do. And some of our big old bogs that are out of grade that just didn't make ice or were unsafe to do so, that's where barge sanding came into play. But now it's becoming more of a mainstream method. So I threw together some pictures and videos just this morning, so you guys would have some clue what the heck I was talking about. But here's our typical ice sanding buggy. It's not unusual to drive by a large grower and see a bunch of these out with for sale signs on them. Some guys have just totally given up on it. The last 3 winters, we've had about 1 day per winter. So we still get our buggies going every season, and if we do get a day of ice, we go for it because it's just that much more efficient. So we can get out on 4.5 to 5 inches of ice. We can put down as much sand as we want, similar to the way you guys do it in Wisconsin. So a lot lighter duty than the 10-wheelers. Smaller bins. If you have good hard ice, like I said, even 4 inches, you can get out there if it's right down on the bog during cold weather. I'll stop that. And so there's the barge, similar to Tucker's. These ones here, I don't know if they're the same Tucker. They were designed by a fella, Skid Whipple, who made plywood prototypes until he started constructing them out of aluminum. We've taken the engines and hydraulic pumps and we've moved them above deck because it was just a losing battle with all the moisture and everything below deck, water getting into our hydraulics, cold mornings, filters cracking. So we've made some modifications. We're going any day that the weather permits. We're barge sanding from the day we're done with harvest. Even during harvest, we're sending crews out in harvest waters to sand. So our next goal is going to be to add some creature comforts to these things because it's pretty tough out there on a cold day standing on that aluminum boat. It's wearing on the guys. So some creature comforts we have on the horizon, as well as GPS. There are a couple growers utilizing GPS technologies, so you're not picking up stakes, and it adds efficiency. So just like Tucker, we load bog side through a conveyor. We pull up underneath, pull down on a bar, activate the conveyor. These bins will hold, if you really heap them up, we can get almost 3 yards of sand in them. But we generally put 1.5 yards to 2 yards in them. And we try to get that to go 180 feet. So we grid the bog out into 180-foot squares. And having those squares laid out allows you to go different directions depending on wind direction. If you have a wind that you're going into, you have to increase your speed or decrease the flow of sand to make up for it. So the guys that are experienced are good at making the adjustments on either their gait on the sanding bin or the speed of their paddles. Here we are. This is from my days at Slocum Gibbs Cranberry using the markers. We put the marker right to the middle. We overlap, shingling our passes. So you aim for the middle, start your roller, roll your stake off to the side. I didn't realize I was already narrating it. For the next stake. Meanwhile, you got to start lifting your fin up, sand drops in. Aim for that stake right there. So that's us laying sand over 180 feet. And then we move over 4 feet, do it again until everything's covered. There's very few farms in Massachusetts laid out similar to those in Wisconsin, but there are a few. And I thought it was important to show this rig, which is constructed similar to the booms that you all use to apply sand with a spinner. I'm not real familiar with this, but it somehow automatically loads it. You can see they've had to dead leg the end of the boom because it obviously wouldn't support the weight of that sanding bin. But this is a really nice, clean, uniform way of doing it, I believe. I'm not exactly sure how far they spread and how far they move over each move. But knowing this existed, I thought it was important to show all of you in Wisconsin because I think this would be probably the most feasible way with your infrastructure to be able to sand with booms like that. This spinner type spreading method is pretty much the primary way that sand's getting applied today in Massachusetts. Although we do mostly barge sanding at the Makepeace company, the rest of the industry here in Massachusetts is relying more so on dry sanding, and generally with a spinner type rig like that. Next is the Terragator. These are the lime and fertilizer spreaders that have been retrofitted to spread sand. This has been deemed probably the most efficient way to sand in the East. These big machines don't lend themselves to peat bottom bogs. You have to have hard bottom bogs. But if you do, it's a real efficient way. If you set up with a couple loaders and to move ramps, these guys can get 10 to 12 acres a day done with one machine. The barges were anywhere between a half and an acre a day per barge, depending on the size of the bog and how far the runs are to the conveyor. But this is Matt Beaton's rig. There's a lot of these now in Massachusetts. You can see you're getting a lot out, 8 yards at a time. They move over so the next pass is just touching the last pass of the tire track, which is shingling it. I think about 40%. Going as slow as possible and putting as much flow towards that chain to get as much sand out as possible. And spinning that spinner as fast as possible. But again, probably the most efficient way of getting sand out if you have the bogs with a hard enough bottom to do so. If you're dealing with softer bottom bog, this is the Harju brothers use these Morooka rigs. They're a tracked dump truck. They generally don't track off the bog. They keep them on the bog and they load them from shore with an excavator. Requires more equipment, but it's a 3 or 4 man operation. And depending on the logistics of the bog layout, you can get up to 5 acres a day done with one of these rigs. Here I have a video of it spreading. You can see a lot slower, a little bit smaller hopper, and a lot slower than the Terragators are, but also lower ground pressure. I sanded a 1-year-old Haines bed, and it went 365 acres a barrel that year, 16 months after planting. So the footprint is really minimal. I know it's frightening to all of you guys seeing these rigs driving out on the vines, and it was to us a decade ago when we started doing it, but we've had to sacrifice because we need the sand out there. Here's another video of it spreading from behind. Let's see, the next rig is a converted snowcat. And rather than spreading the sand, it drops the sand like a traditional sander bin would, resulting in more sand put out. That's all I have of that. That's one of Hannula's rigs. I know 2 other growers have just have been working on these this winter. But again, dry sanding is what they'll do if the sand doesn't go in well. This is a bog that just hasn't had sand in probably a couple decades and just needs it badly. So just getting out there, burying it. If the sand doesn't go in well, they'll flood it into the vines, and then they'll use a harrow to help get it in. This last rig, you guys are all going to think I'm crazy if you don't already. Scott Hanuler, I got to give him credit. He was out at the Vegas equipment show, and he saw a video playing of this slinger meant to put material up into places that traditional equipment can't, underneath bridges and roadside type stuff. So he bought one, and he's been playing with it, putting different deflectors on it. But it's essentially a high-speed conveyor belt, and it can shoot the sand roughly 100 feet. This was just after they purchased it. They were doing it out on the snow so they could really get a gauge on the uniformity as they were playing with different deflectors at the end of the conveyor. They've fine-tuned it a bit. You're restricted. You can only throw it about 100 feet. It's not terribly accurate, but as we're learning, you got to get it out there some way. You can see it's getting about 3/4 of an inch out, and as all the methods are. That's all I have. I know there'll probably be a million questions after seeing all that. 70 to 90 yards an acre, generally speaking, on all of those. The barge standing we do at Makepeace turns out to be about 75 yards to the acre. I've done as much of an inch as an inch and a half, and we don't really see we don't see the benefit of going more than the 3/4 inch. The downside to barge sanding is, the vines being flooded, they're standing up more. It doesn't pin down runners as effectively as ice sanding does. So we still do a lot of pruning, mostly with the Jersey style hay rakes. And on the bogs that don't need it as badly, we use the bull rake style pruners to reduce crop loss. But we still probably prune almost 1/3 of our acreage a year. Our goal is to sand, everything every 5 years. I mean, we have bogs that you can't justify the cost of getting the sand out there. Here in Massachusetts, we rely on our own sand resources. We do have some larger landowners that are selling sand, but it's under a lot of scrutiny and regulatory pressure right now. The cost of sand is well over, it's almost $30 a yard delivered now. It's just crazy. So it's just economically, it's getting difficult to justify sand applications on some of our lower producing beds. So my goal is to keep the money bogs going. If I have 500 barrel an acre mullicas, I'm making sure they're getting sand every 4 to 5 years to maintain that. Personally, and I'm sure most of the room agrees, there's no greater cultural, chemical, any sort of impact on your cranberry bog than getting sand on it. One thing we find with the barge sanding is we don't get any crop reduction that year, which is nice. You don't skip a beat. So it's not unusual either that we will prune and then sand in the same year, and that really gives the bog a good reset. I don't need to go into the benefits of sanding. You all know that, but those are just some of the crazy methods that we've been experimenting with out here in Massachusetts. So,
Awesome.
did I cover a hope in there, Allison?
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for the whole gamut of everything you and your neighbors have tried, and getting to see the possibilities. I think one of the things that's really good about this kind of nationwide sharing is each of our marshes has our own context, and you guys are able to share what's worked for you. hard pan versus peat, these sorts of things. And then the growers that haven't dealt with these challenges before can have a sense of which contextual solutions for you guys might be the first try for them. Tucker or Mike, any questions for John? And we'll move on to Mike, and then we'll open up to the full panel there.
I guess I was just curious with Scott's rigs there, how was he happy with the uniformity he got with those?
Yeah, as he played around with different deflectors, he was able to get better with it. And as he had, a couple operators that worked with it, consistently. The downside is you're limited in the range that you can reach. But a barge like the one I showed you in the video, he flagged that off and then went out there with a dry sander and got the middle afterwards, But, he was able to get out there and do some sanding when he wasn't able to really do anything else on the farm. So, yeah. And he's actually he puts it out for hire, and a lot of small growers utilize that with smaller beds. And it's all of these have mixed opinions. We could argue about it all day around here. Some people think it's ridiculous, and others think it's great, and everything in between. So,
that was neat to see all the different methods out there.
There are a couple others I didn't get pictures of. There's one grower that built it's an aluminum, looks like a steamroller with a bin in the middle, 8-foot wide rollers that he goes right out on the bog after harvest. He's a small fresh fruit guy, and he loads it with a conveyor from the shore, and he's able to go right around and get a light coat of sand on his bogs every year. Just a small one-man operation. Derek and Kenny Harju have a bigger style boom spreader. They built it on a big excavator turntable, and they're able to, rotate it out on the bog, set it with a dead leg, and they have a much bigger bin that spreads even further than the one of the Peltolas I showed you there on the typical, 90-foot boom.
Cool.
So,
all right. And I'll ask this. I think I'll also save this one for the full when we're having full question and answer. So had a question come in, but I think let's thank John. Obviously, thanks to Tucker as well for going first, and then Mike, if you want to bring us in toward home, and then we'll have our full question panel.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Allison. And yeah, John, Tucker, it's great seeing your guys' presentations. And honestly, I'm learning a lot. I didn't realize there are all these different ways of sanding. Not too far away from me here in Massachusetts, 6 hours away. But yeah, I'm Mike Haines from Pine Island, Cranberry, New Jersey. We do barge. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have any pictures. That was really great to see theirs. Maybe once we start sanding, maybe I'll take some and send them to Allison, and she can share with you guys if you're interested. But at our farm we do barge sanding, but on a cable, and that's basically how everyone in the state does their sanding. I've always been pretty envious in Wisconsin how you can do it with the truck on the ice, because that just seems so much more efficient than how we do it here, because it's pretty labor intensive. It's a lot of wear and tear on the equipment. It's slow, and it's as you can see from what John and Tucker presented, it's if you're doing it in a barge on the water, you can't really in real time to evaluate your uniformity, your deposition there. But that's something we've been working on a lot, trying to become more accurate with our sanding, which I'll get into. But anyway, the basics of it is we have a barge. It's 2 separate pontoons together. It's 16 by 20 feet. They're made out of aluminum. It's 2 pieces for easier transport and getting around. And we put them together. We put them in the bog with an excavator and bolt them together and put a hopper on top. The hopper holds 3 to 4 yards of sand. And we have 3 different sanders. One we actually bought from AD Makepeace a while back. I was talking to John about it before the meeting started. That one sands a 10-foot swath. Then our 2 others we have fabricated down here sand a 12-foot swath. And how it works is We have a Honda engine on it that just powers two hydraulic pumps. One works the roller, the agitator, and the door of the hopper. The other works the chains and pulleys that let you go back and forth on the cable. The cable is stretched out over the bog between the excavator, which is also loading the sander, and then a tractor with the winch on it on the other dam. So that's stretched across the bog, if you can imagine that. The barge is going back and forth. Um, when we have the hopper full, we we go back and forth. We do a half inch, anywhere between a half inch and an inch. This year, plan on doing more half inch. We always kind of, I guess, the New Jersey standard was kind of standard sanding practice is 1 inch of sand every 4 years on average, I would say. We've we've been doing that for a while now, but started doing a half inch a little more, just thinking maybe the half inch was a bit too much, or the full inch was a bit too much stress between talking to some of you guys in Wisconsin, reading some papers, and also just seeing results here. We're thinking a half inch, maybe more frequently, like say every 3 years rather than an inch every 4 years. But anyway, when we fill up the hopper, we can do 100 feet at that 10 or 12 foot swath. 100 feet if we're doing an inch, 200 feet if we're doing a half inch. And that's the barge we load, I guess the excavators on the dam, and we have it's getting fed by dump trucks, which depending on which dump trucks we use can hold between 4 to 7 yards of sand. They come and dump the sand at the excavator, and we just call it our sandbox we have at the excavator. It's just a like 2 foot high, maybe 12 by 12 steel kind of box. The reason we dump the sand into that is it kind of makes it easier for the excavator to scoop the sand without mixing in dam material or leaving any sand behind. So that is just why we use that sandbox when we're moving the sand from the dump trucks to the sander. So it fills up. So fill up the sander. They do their 100 to 200 foot swath, and then we move to do the next pass. Now, how we do that to avoid overlap and missing is before all this starts, we have a TopCon GPS unit, and we make a grid on the software for it where we can decide where the best place to start the sanding would be, and then depending on the sander we're using, put a flag out there every 10 to 12 feet, depending if you're using the smaller sander or bigger sander. And then we go and put flags out on both sides of the bog. And we're usually sanding, like say we have a bog, our bogs vary in sizes, but say we're doing like a Wisconsin style bog, we would be going long ways down. And so there'd be obviously like less cable you have to stretch out. And we would put flags every 10 to 12 feet. We do a pass. The operators move of the winch tractor and the excavator move till the cable touches the next flag. And hopefully by doing that, we really minimize overlap or missing, because before we GPSed it like that, we kind of, I wouldn't say eyeballed it, but the operators of the tractor and excavator would have a 10 foot or 12 foot rod. They would just keep moving and to kind of measure how far they should go for the next pass. But that was kind of prone to some human error and that sort of thing. So GPSing and flagging, I think, has really helped our uniformity with the sanding. So that's the basic process. We run 3 crews a day. Between them, we do like 10 to 15 acres of sanding a day on a good day. So yeah, like I mentioned, there's a lot of downsides of it compared to ice sanding. I guess the major good thing about it is you can do it without ice, and that's why we do it, being coastal and more in the south than any other region in North America. We tend to be warmer. And I think we've been barge sanding as far back, I think since the 70s or 80s, something like that. And I know we have occasionally done some ice sanding here and there, but we haven't really had good ice to do that in probably like 10 years. And we tried a little 10 years ago, and we didn't have ice that long, and we don't really have the equipment set up for it because we don't get those conditions too often. But yeah, so in New Jersey, we've been barge sanding since back then. I think before then, it was basically just dry, like super rudimentary dry sanding, like people would cart sand out into the bogs and shovel it onto the vines. So I guess that's kind of the basics of it. Like I said, sorry I didn't have any pictures. I better illustrate it. I'm trying to think anything else. I do on the kind of back end check our uniformity when we dump the water. I'll go with the soil probe and just kind of check like 25 points, like take the soil probe, measure the sand on top of, your duff and whatever, and record that and see how close we got to our half inch or inch. And since we've been doing that GPSing and flagging, we've gotten it down pretty good to we're usually within 1500ths to 2/10ths of an inch, which is, yeah, I'm happy with. Obviously, you'd want to be perfect, but I think we've worked a lot on it and got our uniformity a lot better than it used to be, where we would have misses and overlap. And you would see resulting vine damage, vine dieback, lower production when you had, some bad sanding jobs like that. Trying to think if there's anything else.
Or John or Tucker, any questions for Mike?
Never cable barge. Is it a single cable or a double cable, Mike?
Yeah, just a single. Yeah.
How much of a wind can you operate in?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say, yeah, I didn't even think of the conditions. Once it gets to like 10 miles an hour, 15-mile-an-hour gust, we'll probably stop. And we'll try to eyeball like standing, where like on the one end of the cable or the other, like usually like I'll stand at the excavator and watch to see if you can see it kind of swaying some, and then we'll call it a day. But yeah, I would say probably a rule of thumb, 10 miles an hour, 15-mile-an-hour gust, the barge will start getting blown around. That reminds me of another thing I forgot that is important: the depth of the flood for the barge sanding. So, and John alluded to this, I think, so you don't drag on the vines, because obviously, that's not good for the vines, and that's going to mess up your uniformity. You're going to be going slower and putting out more sand than you wanted to on that swath. And so that's something to think about with bog construction, dam construction, because some of our older bogs we have kind of pretty narrow ditches and lower dams, and we might drag on the vine sometimes, or also we might miss a swath when we first, 5 feet of the bog when we first start, just because on the pontoon, it's like 10 feet in is the opening through which the sand is dropping. And usually the way it's set up, like between our ditches and the slope of our dam, you don't have a miss like that. But in some older, we're a farm that's been around for a while, so the philosophy and processes for bog construction and dam construction has varied through the years. So there's some different setups where we do have misses like that, where we need to come up with a better way to not have that happen. But we flood as high as we can when we do the sanding to minimize any chance of dragging or missing edges or anything like that.
We target 14 inches as a water depth. Ideally, that allows us to really put a heaping load on the barges if we have a bog that needs a lot of sand. Okay. So we're using 24 inches from finished grade on the bog to, we call them dikes in Massachusetts, but to your dike height.
Okay.
On all our new construction. It's my understanding in Wisconsin, the dikes are fairly high for the boom sprayers. So I would imagine the beds out there would lend themselves nicely to barge sanding if you ever got that desperate.
Yeah. That's an important piece of it. And that's interesting. Know the depth you guys shoot for, and we just shoot for flooded as high as we can, which maybe we should get more precise about to minimize beating up the dams any more than we have to. But as of now,
yeah, we've really just geared up over the last 5-6 years to barge sand. So, it's not unusual for us to be building up edges as we're barge sanding, and then we go back after the fact and fix it proper. But it's getting the right amount of water on there is important. So you can go half loads. Half load, your boat's, less displacement. It's floating higher. We have rudders on the back that helps with the steering, so you're not changing your travel speed by turning your paddles on and off. And, you know, it's less accurate, but if you have skinny water, you can take those rudders off and still get some sand out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you just remind me of another thing, John. I said we have a 12-footer. We call it, it does a 12-foot swath of sand versus the 10-footer we bought from Makepeace. And so a 12-footer, obviously, it's more efficient theoretically. You're doing 2 feet more on every pass. But the draft of it is 12 inches loaded versus 8 for the 10-footer. So
Oh, wow.
yeah. So, and draft meaning, the surface of the water to the bottom of the barge loaded. So that's a downside, obviously. Obviously, you sacrifice something going either way. But yeah.
Yeah, we're driving from property to property, so all of our equipment needs to be, we need to be able to pull it over the road. So we go 9 feet wide, 20 feet long, are the size of our boats. We can't get anything around any wider. So
And the pontoon is like one piece.
yeah, it's all one hull. It's all one empty hollow hull.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Flat bottomed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so far, Mike and John and Tucker. I'm going to share one photo of Tucker's that I missed on the way in, since I was just trying to highlight what he was talking about. As people want to head back into question asking mode, we've had a few questions come in. I just wanted to show, since Tucker included himself and his wife and stepson and an employee and some 6th generation grandkids there, so I just didn't want to go too far without discussing that. Let's now go ahead and start to discuss overall questions, whether these are from Wisconsin growers, from coastal growers. The first question that came in as an anonymous question, I'll ask, and I'll have, I think, each of the 3 of you answer, but just wondering, if it wasn't for the physical and monetary issues you face with sanding, would you sand more often than the 5 years for John, or for the 5 to 10 years for Tucker? Just talking about sanding frequency and the trade-offs. What would you do in an ideal world where sanding didn't cost money and where sanding wasn't a logistical headache? Oh, Tucker, I want to unmute you before you go on.
I would say every year if I could.
I'd probably stick in that 4 to 5 year range just with what we're doing. But ideally I would be trying to do some type of if we could have ice and get dump trucks out there, I mean, that would be ideally, but.
John, your answer was pretty well felt.
Yeah, if I could wave a magic wand, I'd love to have a half an inch every single year.
And Mike, how about you?
I'd say we do what we think is ideally right. Like, we think it's worth the investment of money and time, so we're, lucky enough to be in a position where we can do that. So I guess we're doing what we think is best, which is, like I said, a half inch to an inch in that 3 to 4 year thing. And right now we're leaning towards a half inch every 3 years. Although that would be a whole another conversation I'd be interested to have with everyone at some point, is everyone's thoughts on depth of sand and frequency.
Mm-hmm. Another question I think is especially for Tucker, but maybe applies to Mike and John as well. Wisconsin sand is mostly silicon dioxide, glaciers and sandstone, with sand coming from the beach areas. Does your sand makeup have higher levels of calcium carbonate or anything else that's impacting soil pH over long amounts of time?
Yeah, our sand is definitely different from your all's in Wisconsin. The few times I've been back there and been around to some places, your guys is much more loamier and kind of just bigger-ish. Ours would be more sandy or more fine and gray looking. I did get some soil tests on it done. This is probably like 15 years ago now. I don't exactly remember the content, but there is an issue, not necessarily so much with the sand that we would dig out of our ponds or dig out, just on the farm, but if we're getting it hauled off the beach, there could be a potential if, it has a lot of salt, right away, of taking it, like hauling it in like that day and, putting it out within a few days. If it hasn't rained at all, you could have I can't remember exactly what it would be, but there could be some issues into that. But we've never really had an issue as far as from barge sanding. I know some growers that have sanded a field to plant on off of beach sand that they didn't let sit at all, that they do really think it affected the growth on that, but that was on a new planting.
I can definitely imagine that. John or Mike, I don't know enough about your local soils to know whether that question applies to you or not.
For us, I mean, we're coastal too, obviously, but it sounds like we're farther from the shore, probably like 30 miles inland. But yeah, we're outer coastal plain here. It's real sandy. I mean, obviously we're growing cranberries, but the pH I think is fine. There's no salinity issues, and it does vary a lot. Like you could dig. I think it's probably the same for you guys, but I guess I'm not sure. You can dig 100 feet away from one spot, and you have it's sand, but it's it could be way siltier, way coarser. I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking, but we have good sand. But there are a lot of areas that the sand is not ideal and would have to be refined more for us, washed or for us to feel comfortable putting it on bogs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, our sand varies. I'm not sure of the chemical makeup of it. We're more interested in we'll do sieve analysis to understand the fines and the coarseness of it, I guess, and decide what sand resource we use for renovations versus sanding. The issue with siltier sand is it takes longer to settle out in the bog. We need to hold the water for a bit of time to let that silt settle out. We'll try to run it through as many different bog systems as we can before it leaves the property to reduce the environmental impact. But we're fortunate here. This is where the glacier stopped. We have some hills and some holes, but all in all, we have some beautiful sand just off of Cape Cod.
Awesome. Pivoting a little bit from sand resources and into the equipment itself, is that Morooka rubber track machine with the dump box and spinner spreader custom built?
The spinner bin, the Morooka itself is a production piece of equipment, but the spinner bin that was put on it, I believe, was retrofitted off of like a truck sander or a fertilizer spreader. Oftentimes, if it comes off a truck spreader used for like road salt and sand, the chain that drives it needs to be beefed up, and oftentimes the spinner itself needs to be beefed up because they just wear out so quick. They're not meant to spread the amount of sand and as vigorously and as far as what they're designed to do. So those are pretty custom. The Terragators, it's my understanding they're pretty available, especially out there where you all are in the Midwest where they use them. But generally $35,000 to $40,000 is what a grower is spending for a turnkey ready to go. Because they're putting so much flow towards the belt and the spinners to get more out. The rear of the bin, is my understanding, isn't quite built for it, and it'll push the sand right up and out. So the growers have to fab the tailgate of it up a little higher in the sides, just so it doesn't push sand right up out of the bins. But other than that, with these Morookas they're buying, there's very little fabrication that has to go on. If the tires are in good shape, it's not unusual for a grower to take a grinder or a chainsaw and cut some of the tread off of the tires to make them smoother. But that Morooka I showed was an old one. The Harjus have purchased a couple newer ones since, and they love them. They have cameras, so the operator can see how much sand is left. They'll go about 400 feet. They'll either do a bog from one side and then go from the other side to finish it. On smaller bogs, they can go across and then they can actually spread backwards. You can't do too much turning on the bog with those tracks, so you have to spend your whole time coming back to get loaded to kind of get back into position. So you're not turning too much on the bog. So a little slower than the Terragators, but certainly less impactful and lower ground pressure.
Awesome. I want to encourage lots of questions. I have had my curiosity absolutely piqued by the information shared here by Tucker and by John and by Mike. And I know we've got a lot of folks on the call here, almost 50 people. So ask your questions. I think everyone's learned at least 3 new things today. And go ahead and share those thoughts with us. While I wait for more questions to come in, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask, or just type into the chat. In terms of, do the 3 of you see pruning as something that you do by default, or do you see pruning as something that you do if it's been too long since we've gotten good sand coverage? Do you think of pruning as a kind of a fallback practice, or do you have that as part of your main canopy management plan?
Case by case basis. It's generally bogs that were just over fertilized the prior year.
Okay.
2 years ago, we had a super wet growing season. We wish we could have hit the stop button on a lot of the bogs, which we couldn't. This year, we were almost totally reliant on irrigation water to activate our fertilizer, and you all know how that goes. It isn't the same. So, you can only look into the crystal ball so far. But if you start overrunning your canopy, the fruit becomes undeliverable come harvest. I mean, I grew up getting 99, 98% usable fruit loads. Now we're doing handsprings for a 90%. And it's not us, it's the climate. Right? Canopy management is key to fruit quality for us.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm on the same page as John. Like, pruning for us, raking is more like if something went awry, basically, like too much nitrogen one way or another, whether we put too much on or it was too wet. As last year, we've generally been dry the past like 4 years overall, but last year, kind of mid-June to mid-July in New Jersey is pretty wet, and it pushed a lot of growth to the point where we did do a lot of raking last fall, and those bogs that grew so much, we didn't put nitrogen on a lot of them still this year. And to relate it to sanding, I guess sometimes, we can see sanding does push some growth, especially. So we'll be careful with nitrogen the next year. And in New Jersey, there used to be a thought like the year after you sanded, don't put any roughneck fertilizer on nitrogen. Now, I don't really do roughneck nitrogen anymore regardless, but I guess some people still do. But there's just a kind of, thought where people, one way or another, will be hold back on nitrogen a little more after sanding. But anyway, I guess to answer the question, yeah, like John said, we rake if we have to, but I feel like ideally we don't have to rake.
I am going to put up my slide of upcoming events just because we're getting close to the hour mark, and I want people, if they have to leave a hard stop at 1, they can see what's coming up next. But we do have a couple more questions if you're willing to take those. The first one was, what was the approximate price tag on that high-speed conveyor?
About 300 grand is my understanding.
$300,000. Okay. Wow. And what kind of equipment and tools are you guys using to prune? Well, I heard John and Mike talking a little bit before the meeting, and sounded like you guys have a consistent vocabulary of what you mean by the different things, and they're not as familiar in the central part of the states. So quick overview would be great.
Yeah, we use the most efficient piece of equipment is I call it a Jersey style hay rake. I think the ones that we have here were made in Pemberton, New Jersey.
Yeah.
they windrow the vines to one side, and then you can just keep windrowing it over, and it makes it a little more efficient getting the vines bundled up and off. They tend to take more budding uprights. And it's not unusual to lose a third of your crop if you need to prune it heavily. So it's something we avoid, but it's necessary in a lot of pieces. The less intrusive method is the bull rake that just has the fixed blades that run through as a chain goes along with some pieces of round stock that just, get the runners 90 degrees to your cutting blades. Doesn't prune as much, but again, doesn't take as many uprights. And it's more labor intensive to get the vines bundled up and dragged off and cleaned up.
Okay.
Oh yeah. For us, I'm not sure on the terminology either. I might be talking about the same thing. For pruner wise, not exactly sure what it'd be called, but there's three bars with knives. It can either be a hook build blade or a straight blade, and they kind of just go around, be real similar to like what a beater would look like, spinning around, and then you'd windrow it over to the side and then packing them off the field. But yes, very labor intensive, slow. It doesn't necessarily get too aggressive. Doesn't sound like as aggressive as the windrowers. But so if you do have a heavily overgrowth area, it's kind of hard to get it knocked back. But it does a medium to light. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And like John said, those machines fabricated down here in Pemberton, it's just kind of I guess it was like a hay rake, I guess like a tractor implement that just kind of fabricated into kind of ride on homemade machine for us to use. They're kind of wonky. You can go higher or lower if you want. You can go lower and yeah, you chop a lot of productive uprights, like John said, but you hopefully get more runners. So you just kind of weigh that in your head, how heavy you want to go. And we did last year in some of those bogs I was mentioning where we had a lot of growth. We did a couple passes in some of those bogs with the rakes and got a lot of material out. But yeah, then the crop was not amazing this year, but hopefully in the long run, it's the right thing.
I will, since we're a little bit past one here, go ahead and say that we will not have a brown bag for January because we're having the Cranberry School. That's in person January 15th and 16th at the Wilderness Resort in Wisconsin Dells. We will start brown bags up again in February and March. For those who are due for their nutrient management planning, writing, training, that is going to be held February 4th. And I've heard that not as many people have been aware of the nutrient management planning training, so help to get the word out about that to your friends. I'm going to link the agenda and the session descriptions over here in the chat. If you need to register for Cranberry School, you should see those messages from Anne or from the WisCran website. And any other questions while I grab those links? You did get a very hearty thank you from Rodney in the chat saying thanks for sharing all of those pictures and stories of all of the various sanding equipment. As we mentioned, there's nothing like the ability of farmers to come up with cool and unexpected solutions to challenges. So since we had this direct request from growers at our research roundtable to discuss what does the world look like if we're sanding without ice, the three of you have done a wonderful job sharing your stories, and very appreciative. Look forward to keeping these discussions going as long as people have questions if they wonder. So thanks to Tucker. I hope he's still there, but thanks to
but I'm still here.
Oh, great. Okay.
I lost you there for a minute.
Gotcha. Well, very good. Any other questions? Otherwise, we will end the recording and wish everyone a Merry Christmas, and looking forward to seeing those who we can see at the Cranberry School.